Hey everyone, this is day 4, and we're going to be talking about objects of prepositions. So first, what is a preposition? Basically, it's a word that shows a relationship between two things in regard to either time or location. Okay, now in all honesty, we can go to a new level with prepositions, and they can get a little more complicated, but time and location is by and large most of what we're talking about with prepositions. Okay, when we use prepositions in everyday speech, a lot of times it's one of these two things. Okay, so if a preposition shows a relationship between two things, let's take a look at an example thinking of a rabbit and a log. Okay, so all of these sentences are going to be about this relationship between this rabbit and this log in regard to location. So the rabbit can go next to the log, it can go over the log, or through the log, under the log, near the log, and a whole bunch more. It can be by the log, okay, in front of the log, underneath the log, below the log. Okay, all of those words essentially do the same thing. Although they describe the rabbit in a different location, they are all showing the relationship that the rabbit has with the log in regard to location. Okay, so they're describing a relationship of location. Where's the rabbit in regard to the log? Okay, so this is what prepositions do. Now, we also have prepositions of time. We watch the movie after dinner, before dinner, during dinner. Okay, so this relationship between, when we watched versus dinner. Okay, so before, after, during, these are your prepositions of time. Okay, so same thing, showing this relationship between two things in regard to time now. Okay, so here's where we get to the object of the preposition. If a preposition shows a relationship between two things, the object of the preposition is always the second thing. It always comes after the preposition. So if we go back to the rabbit and the log, okay, the object of the preposition is always going to be the log. Okay, because in all of these examples, it comes after the preposition. So, for example, next to, okay, is the preposition. Okay, so that marks the beginning of what we call a prepositional phrase, and then log, the object, finishes that prepositional phrase, and it is the object of the preposition that finishes the phrase. Okay, over, log. So over begins it, log finishes it. Through begins it, log finishes it. Okay, in each case, log is the object of the preposition. Same thing with our other example, dinner, okay, is the object of the preposition since it's coming before, after, before, and during. Okay, now, objects of prepositions versus direct objects. So here we're starting to get into where this stuff actually kind of matters. Okay, so let's take two similar sentences. Doug mowed the pasture versus Doug mowed in the pasture. Okay, so direct objects always answer the what question. Objects of prepositions generally answer the how, where, when question. Okay, so Doug mowed what? He mowed the pasture. Okay, Doug mowed where? In the pasture. Okay, now here's what we have to understand. In this one, right here, we have a sentence with direct object. Okay, now notice this. So mowed is our verb. Okay, so who or what mowed? Doug mowed, he's the subject. What was mowed? The pasture. That's the direct object. Now notice there are no prepositions in here. Okay, whereas in the second one, here's what we have. Some people could think like, well, it's the same thing. Like, okay, mowed, Doug mowed, and then what was mowed? The pasture. Well, here's the deal, actually, and here's how prepositions change things. While it's very likely that Doug was mowing the pasture in this sentence, very probable, it's not in fact a guarantee. Okay, this sentence is less direct and more vague than the other one. We can deduce that it's very likely he was mowing the pasture, but for all we know, it doesn't actually say what he was mowing in the pasture. Perhaps there's a flower bed or a big patch of weeds. Okay, perhaps he's mowing something else that's in the pasture. Now, although that's unlikely, I hope that you see how this actually isn't necessarily saying that the pasture itself was mowed. So here's the bottom line. The game changer in this is this word in. we now have a preposition in the sentence. It's not telling us what Doug mows, it's telling us where he mows. Okay? Doug's location in regard to the pasture. So, what happens here when we have a preposition, it's like a trump card. Okay? And what this means is that pasture in this case is no longer a direct object, but because it's coming after the word in, it is now the object of a preposition. And that's always the way it's going to be. When you have a preposition, that second thing that comes after it is always going to be the object of the preposition. Now, down here, this little note, bottom line. It doesn't matter a whole lot if you can tell the difference between direct object and objects of the preposition in the real world. Now, it will matter for the quiz on Thursday, okay? But in the real world, no, it doesn't matter a whole lot. What matters is whether or not you can tell the difference between subjects and objects. That's what matters, okay? You have to be able to tell what subjects are. You have to be able to tell what verbs are. Those are the foundational parts of understanding sentence types and things like run-ons and fragments, comma splices, okay? So the whole reason we're learning about objects is just so that you don't get them confused with subjects.